Chapter 605. Brother Een. Yu Qianshou called out and extended 4 fingers towards Een Baikong. Just give me another 4 billion. I've already taken 1 billion, so 5 billion is just nice. He took the initiative to reduce another 1 billion. Even he felt his heart ache when he said this. Normally, he would have to spend a lot of effort to get 1 billion. However, he had no confidence in this old fox. No matter how he looked at it, this old fox did not look like someone who could be easily fooled. Who knew what he was planning? Thus, he reduced it again and again. He wanted to wait and see what would happen next before making a decision. This was also to give himself some leeway. He was afraid that the other party would do something too crazy and no one would be able to stop him. Another 1 billion. Een Baikong's heart became more and more determined. He immediately treated the 5 billion as floating clouds. He waved his hand and said, "Brother Nyo, we'll talk about the 1 billion later. Keep it with you for now. It will come in handy when you return to the immortal world. I'll take out another 5 billion to buy the restriction-breaking pill." After he finished speaking, he did not wait for Nyo Yu to reject and disappeared into the Hall of Wealth. Oh my! Yu Qianshou let out a breath of cold air and raised his thumb in his heart. He could only use one word to describe his current feelings: admiration. 1 billion. He threw it out without blinking an eye. This boldness and heroism made Yu Qianshou feel inferior. Only now did he understand that it was not a coincidence that Een Baikong could become a famous figure in the immortal world. This person had the courage of an ambitious and ruthless person. He was someone who would achieve great things. Regardless of whether Een Baikong succeeded or failed in the future, just this breadth of mind alone was enough for Yu Qianshou to give him a high evaluation. Not long after, Een Baikong reappeared with 5 bulging storage pouches. He handed them over and said, "Each storage pouch has the capacity of 3 rooms, just enough to fill 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. There are exactly 5 billion here. Brother Nyo, please count them." "No need, I trust Brother Een." Yu Qianshou took it and threw it directly into the bracelet on his wrist. Since the other party was generous, he couldn't be stingy. Moreover, the other party was the one who paid first, so there was no need for him to lie. Een Baikong smiled and nodded. Nyo Yu raised 3 fingers and said, "Within 3 days, 5,000 limit-breaking pellets will be delivered on time. Brother Een, be prepared to inspect the goods." "Alright, it's a deal." After the two of them made an appointment, Een Baikong arranged for him to stay in a house with its own courtyard halfway up the God of Wealth Peak. Yu Qianshou summoned Amano and the other 3 and shut himself up in the house for a whole day. When Amano and the other 3 reappeared, their cultivations had all risen to the early stage of passing calamity. Een Baikong, who had come to see Nyo Yu off, witnessed this miracle with his own eyes. Although he didn't say anything, his heart was filled with excitement. "Remember what I've told you. If you dare to go against me, you'll have to think about the consequences." Yu Qianshou warned Amano and the other 3 expressionlessly. At the same time, he threw each of them a storage pouch containing 1 million high-grade spirit stones. The 4 respectfully complied and watched as the 2 late-stage soul formation experts slowly made their way to the top of the mountain. At the top of the God of Wealth Peak, Yu Qianshou cupped his hands towards Een Baikong and said, "The 4 of them have offended the Blue Palace. I'll have to trouble Brother Een to look after them while I'm gone. Brother Nyo, don't worry. I'll personally oversee the cornucopia. They'll be fine." Een Baikong smiled. "I'll be leaving first. See you in 2 days." As soon as Yu Qianshou finished speaking, he immediately stared at the horizon with a solemn expression. He didn't move for a long time. Een Baikong stared unblinkingly at Yu Qianshou, afraid to miss a single detail. He really wanted to broaden his horizons and see how immortals used their divine abilities. Suddenly, Nyo Yu closed his eyes, put his palms together and placed them between his eyebrows. His mouth was mumbling something. Een Baikong listened attentively, but he couldn't understand what Nyo Yu was saying. He continued to blabber on and on. Suddenly, an eerie and terrifying majestic aura surged out from Nyo Yu's body. It was as if everything within a 10-meter radius had entered a different world. The eerie and terrifying aura gathered within a 10-meter radius and didn't dissipate. Gradually, a dense gray fog formed, wrapping around Nyo Yud like a large gray ball. Een Baikong was also within this area. He couldn't help but be secretly alarmed. He discovered that if he didn't circulate his energy to defend himself, he wouldn't be able to withstand it with his cultivation alone. He secretly released his divine sense to investigate. However, just as his divine sense left his body, a bone-deep pain imprinted itself in his mind. He immediately withdrew his divine sense. His divine sense was slightly damaged in an instant. It felt like it was being burned. This kind of pain was almost unbearable. Een Baikong forcefully gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. Yu Qianqiu was secretly amused. You actually dared to release your divine sense in the face of such a dense black fire. It must be uncomfortable, right? After deliberately acting mysterious for a while, he disappeared from the world. Even the gray fog disappeared along with him. The mountain peak was calm and tranquil. Een Baikong looked around and was shocked once again. He couldn't tell how Nyo Yud left. In any case, it wasn't teleportation. There wasn't a trace of teleportation in all directions. Nyo Yud disappeared into thin air just like that. Oh. Een Baikong let out a long and painful groan. His wrinkled old face seemed to have crumpled into a lump. Just now, for the sake of his face, he gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. After confirming that Nyo Yud had really left, he revealed a pained expression. He sat down cross-legged. Before recuperating, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. He thought to himself, immortals are indeed immortals. Even if he's just an errand boy, just his aura alone is enough to suppress my divine sense. It's too scary. The moment Yu Qianqiu appeared in Ethereal Palace, he instantly caused a commotion. First, he heard the sound of an alarm. Then, Chu Ping appeared with a large group of palace maids. All of them wielded Dharma artifacts and were about to attack him. In the direction of Utopia's army camp, the alarm for a special class battle was quickly blown. While Yu Qianqiu was still in a daze, a black mass of people surged over. In the blink of an eye, Ethereal Palace was completely surrounded. Guan Yu, Chen Feng, Zhang Peng, and even the rarely seen Bai Suzhen appeared. All of them looked at him with malicious intent. Damn it! Are you trying to rebel? Yu Qianqiu was instantly enraged. Suddenly, Chu Ping shouted with her sword in hand, "Who are you? How dare you barge into Ethereal Palace?" Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth and suddenly burst into laughter. He touched his face. He understood what the problem was. It was all because of Nyo Yud's image. He had forgotten to revert to his original form. How dare you? Chu Ping's face was filled with rage. The other party had actually ignored her words and was even mocking her. On the other hand, Bai Suzhen was slightly taken aback. She raised her hand and pressed down on the sword in Chu Ping's hand. She smiled sweetly and said, "It's Yu Qianqiu." Bai Suzhen didn't speak easily in Utopia, but the effect of her words was undeniable. The tense atmosphere dissipated in an instant. A few people who were ranked highly in Utopia looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. Yu Qianqiu removed the force that was suppressing his throat and vocal cords to change his voice. He cursed, "Damn it! I thought you wanted to rebel." As he spoke, he expended some effort to remove the human skin mask from his face. Perhaps because he had worn it for too long, it was almost sticking to his skin. Then, he waved his hand at everyone and said, "Guan Yu, Chen Feng, and Zhang Peng, stay behind. The rest of you, go back and do what you need to do." With the leader's order, everyone immediately returned to their positions. Chu Ping walked over and took the human skin mask from Yu Qianqiu's hands. She fiddled with it and asked curiously, "What is this?" "Be good. Don't spoil it. It's still very useful." Yu Qianqiu took back the human skin mask and looked around at everyone. "This thing is good for disguising. It has the same characteristics as human skin. As long as you don't reveal any flaws when you put on makeup, no matter how high the other party's cultivation level is, they won't be able to see through it. Chu Ping looked at Bai Suzhen with a complicated expression. Then, she smiled and said, "How did you know it was him?" Bai Suzhen faintly smiled and gently said, "It's just a feeling." Chu Pinger disapprovingly replied with an "oh," and did not say anything else. Yu Qianqiu put the human skin mask into his storage pouch. Then, he took out 5 storage pouches from his bracelet. He threw one each to Bai Suzhen, Chu Ping, Guan Yu, Chen Feng, and Zhang Peng. He smiled and said, "Take a look." It was a little like he was showing off. The 5 of them were puzzled. They used their divine sense to scan the storage pouch. Then, they revealed a shocked expression and looked at each other. The storage pouch was filled to the brim with high-grade spirit stones. It was hard to imagine how many there were. With such a dense storage, it was not a few 100,000 or even a few million. It took the 5 of them a lot of effort to count. In the end, they all said the 2 words, 1 billion. They looked at each other in disbelief. A total of 5 billion. Zhang Peng's words were shocking. He murmured, "Yesterday, we received 1 billion. Today, another 5 billion, 6 billion high-grade spirit stones?" Chu Ping could not help but exclaim. The gazes of the few of them turned to look at Yu Qianqiu. They were convinced that he had managed to get 6 billion in 2 days. It was hard to imagine how he had done it. "It's 5 billion, then." Yu Qianqiu pointed at Guan Yu and Zhang Peng. "Put them away. Go back and make arrangements. With this money, we should be able to solve the problem of increasing the cultivation of most of the team members." The 2 of them took the 5 storage pouches and went back to the camp to make arrangements. Yu Qianqiu turned to Chen Feng and asked, "How many pseudo-limit breaking pills have you made?" Chen Feng came back to his senses from the dazzling spirit stones and said, "There are almost 30,000 of them." "Why is there so little?" "I don't know if it's enough." Yu Qianqiu frowned. When Chen Feng heard that, goosebumps rose all over his body. This thing was poison. 30,000 was not enough? How many people were you planning to give them to? He could not help but ask weakly, "Boss, what are you planning to do?" "Sell them for money," Yu Qianqiu replied casually. He stretched out his hand and said, "Give them all to me." Chen Feng's waist was full of storage pouches. One look and one could tell that he was a professional. He took off one and handed it to Yangming with trepidation. Yu Qianqiu injected his divine sense into it and casually took a look. There were indeed about 30,000. He then instructed, "Hurry up and make more. Go." After Chen Feng left, Yu Qianqiu immediately instructed Chu Ping, to help him prepare a large amount of spirit herbs for refining the 7 treasure pill. He wanted to personally refine a batch. This was because he and Chen Feng were the best in Utopia. Only the pills refined by them had such a mesmerizing halo. Chapter 606. On the roof of the ethereal palace in the starry sky. Yu Qianqiu's hands were holding a pale green, almost transparent flame. The pillar of flame rose high into the air, dyeing the roof of the ethereal palace in a dreamy, flowing color. If one looked closely, they would notice that the fire pillars in each hand seemed to be divided into 10 layers, and each layer was refining a furnace of elixirs. 10 furnaces in one hand, 20 furnaces in both hands. Elixirs were constantly thrown out from the swirling flames. After Chu Ping, and Bai Suzhen collected the elixirs, they immediately threw spirit herbs into the empty fire layers. The 2 girls kept collecting elixirs and throwing spirit herbs. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were tightly shut, and he was completely focused on refining without a word. He had been standing there for almost a day without taking a break. In the beginning, he was still using 2 hands, refining 1 furnace in each hand. Later, he realized that as his cultivation increased, his ability to control fire increased tremendously. This was child's play. Hence, he increased the number of layers until he reached the 15th layer. Only then did he feel that controlling his divine sense was a little strenuous. Finally, when he reached the 10th layer, he realized that not only was he faster at this level, but he could also control his divine sense with ease. Hearing that Yu Qianqiu had returned, Xiao Wanqing stood quietly by the lake, rubbing her growing belly, her eyes fixed on the towering ethereal palace. Suddenly, she noticed the dreamy colors above the ethereal palace. It was so beautiful. She turned her eyes and returned to the valley. Not long after, she saw Chen Feng, who had been scratching his head, come out. Chen Feng looked a little helpless. Boss had told him to hurry up and refine more pseudo-limit breaking pills, and he was busy underground. But his wife said that there was something strange in the ethereal palace, and insisted on taking him with her to take a look. Xiao Wanqing's belly was growing, and Chen Feng didn't dare to make her unhappy, so he accompanied her. The two of them flew directly to the top of the ethereal palace, and the scene in front of them immediately stunned them. After looking for a while, Chen Feng's face twitched. He was really speechless. Boss was indeed boss, too awesome. So awesome that it was a little exaggerated. One person was equivalent to 20 elixir refining experts. Just this divine sense control alone was beyond anyone's reach. What he did not know was that Yu Qianqiu cultivated the Guiyuan sword technique, was that it could temper one's spiritual sense. Just think about it, if one could control thousands of flying swords at the same time, it wouldn't be a problem to control the refinement of 20 cauldrons of pills. If it wasn't for the fact that the refinement of pills was far more exquisite than sword riding, and the fact that he had to control the fire at the same time, not to mention 20 batches, he could still refine 200 batches. When Bai Suzhen and Chu Ping'er saw the couple, they smiled at them apologetically. They were too busy to take care of them. Xiao Wanqing looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing solemnly in the hallucinatory colors, and was slightly dazed. This man had always been outstanding. They had gotten to know each other, and they had formed a friendship during the trials in the myriad fragrance garden of Fuxian Island and the realm of demons. Since then, he had been paying attention to him. When he was still a disciple of supporting Immortal Island, he was already famous and much stronger than his peers. After that, he was chased out of supporting Immortal Island. Who knew that he would become even more famous? He became even more outstanding, and everyone knew him. However, it was this man that she had always secretly admired. It didn't matter if he didn't like her, but he had heartlessly given her to someone else. In 2 days, he had earned 6 billion superior-grade spirit stones. Who knew where he was doing so well now? Xiao Wanqing bit her lips tightly, and a trace of hatred flashed in her eyes. The more extraordinary Yu Qianqiu looked under the hallucinatory colors, the more intense the hatred in her eyes became. Didn't you say that your alchemy skills are almost catching up to his? Do you really think you can catch up to him? I think you are far inferior compared to him. Not to mention alchemy, which aspect can you compare to him in? I think you will never be able to catch up to him. In the future, you should just hide underground obediently and don't come out to see others. Otherwise, you will come out to boast shamelessly and embarrass me and my future baby, Xiao Wanqing said to Chen Feng through telepathy as she rubbed her belly. Her current cultivation had already reached the early stage of tribulation transcendence, and she had the ability to send voice transmissions. Chen Feng's envious expression froze. He looked at Xiao Wanqing's belly and replied awkwardly, "Boss is naturally better than us. Otherwise, how could he be our boss? Let's go back. Useless thing, you don't want to improve. When the baby is born in the future, don't tell him that this thing that hides underground all day is his father." Xiao Wanqing rolled her eyes and turned to fly down the mountain. Chen Feng was stunned. Then, he chased after her with a complicated expression. 2 days later, Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and looked at the two women. He smiled and said, "Stop." The two women looked at each other and smiled as they watched Yu Qianqiu finish the last few furnaces in his hands. "How much have you refined?" Yu Qianqiu asked the two of them. Chu Ping looked at Bai Suzhen. She knew that Bai Suzhen actually had more say in the entire utopia than she did. Although everyone knew that she was the leader's woman, everyone was respectful to her. However, they were respectful to Bai Suzhen to the point of obedience. They were completely different concepts. This was especially so for the entire Utopia army. She couldn't command them, but Bai Sujin only needed to calmly instruct them, and the entire army immediately obeyed her orders. Previously, because the purple chaos was getting further and further away from here, Chu Ping wanted to reopen a spiritual herb garden closer to the purple chaos. However, she didn't have enough manpower. Therefore, she went to the Utopia army camp to find Guan Yu and Zhang Peng, asking them to mobilize the army for help. At that time, the few commanders were also present. They thought that it was a very simple matter, but who knew that the two of them would hesitate? In the end, Guan Yu smiled bitterly and said, "If the army is used for other purposes, without the leader's orders, no one can mobilize it." With this sentence, Chu Ping was so angry that she swung her hands and left. When she returned to Ethereal Palace, she was still fuming. Coincidentally, she bumped into Bai Sujin, who rarely came out. When the latter saw this, she found it strange and asked her what was going on. After understanding the situation, she immediately brought Chu Ping to the army camp. At that time, Bai Sujin only said calmly to Guan Yu and the others, "These are all logistical needs. Ethereal Palace doesn't have enough manpower, so please help us. It won't take long for the army." It was just a simple sentence, but the chief instructor, the adjutant, and the few commanders stood solemnly and saluted back. "Yes, sir. We'll carry it out immediately." Then, the army quickly gathered. Chu Ping immediately understood everything. She didn't believe that Yu Qianqiu hadn't instructed it. Actually, up until now, she had spent some effort to understand. Yu Qianqiu had a tight grip on the military power of Utopia's army. It seemed like he didn't care much, but he had never relaxed his grip. Even the chief instructor, Guan Yu, and the adjutant, Zhang Peng, only had the right to train and temporarily command. Other than Bai Sujin, no one else could be mobilized. Therefore, the only person who could completely control Utopia's military power was Yu Qianqiu. However, in Utopia, there was another person who could mobilize the army at will. That was Bai Sujin. This undoubtedly meant that without Yu Qianqiu around, the number one person in Utopia wasn't Chu Ping, but Bai Sujin, who rarely showed her face. Bai Sujin didn't reply. She handed the storage bag in her hand to Chu Ping. At this moment, Chu Ping smiled and said, "I refined nearly 500 batches of 10 pills each. There are almost 5,000 pills. None of them are useless." Hee hee. Didn't you see who did it? It's only right. Yu Qianqiu chuckled as he took the 2 storage bags and threw them into the bracelet. He looked at the sky and said, "I still have something to do. I'll be leaving first. You guys can go back." "You're leaving so soon," Chu Ping said in disappointment. "Why? Do you miss me?" Yu Qianqiu hugged her with one hand and smiled slyly. He brazenly took advantage of her voluptuous body. At the side, Bai Sujin smiled faintly and said softly, "Be careful when you're outside." After saying that, she didn't disturb the two of them and floated down from the roof of Ethereal Palace. "I'll leave later," Chu Ping said with a blushing face. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, "I've already made an appointment with someone outside. It's not good to break it. Next time. I'll make time to serve you properly next time. Can't I do it today?" Chu Ping begged. "I really have something to do. I'll definitely do it next time." Yu Qianqiu said that and ran away shamelessly. Chu Ping was left standing on the roof of Ethereal Palace, feeling lost. In the house halfway up the God of Wealth Peak, Yu Qianqiu strolled out. Amano and the other 3 were all in the courtyard. When they saw him suddenly appear, they were a little shocked. They didn't know when he entered the house. There was only one entrance, and the courtyard wasn't big. They were exchanging cultivation experiences in the courtyard, and they didn't see anyone enter the house. But thinking about it, it was too easy for a soul formation final stage expert to hide from their eyes. "Mr." The 4 of them bowed in unison. They had already changed the way they addressed him. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to indicate that the 4 of them didn't need to be so polite. His gaze fell on Li Qiuxiang's face. At this moment, Li Qiuxiang had already removed the veil on her face. Her face was full of bumps and bumps. Deep scratches intersected on her face. She looked horrifying and creepy. She didn't look like a beauty anymore. Yu Qianzhou saw that her eyes were calm and didn't feel uncomfortable at all. He couldn't help but show a look of approval and said, "That's right. It's true that you've been cleansed. Looks like being disfigured isn't a bad thing. At least it can help you find yourself and not lose yourself. Don't worry. If there's a chance, I'll help you recover your appearance." "Mister, can she still recover her original appearance?" Amano asked. His expression was a little excited and emotional. "Why? Where's the sincerity from before? Could it be that you're tired of looking at it so quickly? Looks like my painstaking efforts have been wasted." Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly. No. Amano waved his hands. He was a little incoherent. He didn't know how to explain himself. However, Li Qiuxiang said calmly, "Mister, he didn't mean it that way. He was just doing it for my own good. Actually, it doesn't matter to me whether I recover my appearance or not. Forget it." "Is there a woman who doesn't like beautiful women?" Yu Qianzhou raised his brows. Seeing that her eyes were calm, he didn't explain himself. He couldn't help but smile. "When the time is right, I'll help you recover your appearance." With that said, he took out a flying sword and flew toward the mountain top. Chapter 607. At the top of the God of Wealth Peak, under the pine tree, Yin Baikong stood there for 2 days without leaving. His expression was dark and gloomy. Niu Yud's 3-day deadline was already slightly exceeded. It would be a lie to say that he didn't care at all after throwing out 6 billion. Only one's heart knew how it felt to have one's attitude in front of others and worry in the back. At this time, Yin Baikong's tensed face gradually relaxed. He saw a figure slowly flying over from the foot of the mountain. His heart relaxed, and a happy smile blossomed on his face. He walked slowly to the front of the hill to welcome Niu Yud. But in his heart, he was somewhat moved. This Niu Yud was indeed amazing. No matter if he entered or left the cornucopia, no one could discover him. Sorry for being late." Yu Qianzhou landed and cupped his hands. He said with some shame, "In order to find Yu Qianzhou, I was a bit late. I hope Brother Yin won't take offense." "Brother Niu, you're treating me like an outsider." Yin Baikong laughed heartily. He was indeed very happy. Since Niu Yud had returned, it meant that he had made the right bet. A bit late was not a big deal. Yu Qianzhou didn't say anything else. He took out a storage pouch and threw it over, saying, 5,000 restriction-breaking pills, not one less. Brother Yin, please inspect the goods and see how effective they are." "No need, I trust Brother Niu." Yin Baikong waved his hand generously. After confirming that there were indeed 5,000 limit-breaking pills, he was already very satisfied. Even if he wanted to inspect the goods, it was not good to do so in front of Niu Yud. This has nothing to do with trust. Since we're doing business, we have to follow the rules to avoid any misunderstandings. Yu Qianzhou strongly requested for the other party to inspect the goods on the spot. "All right, we'll do as Brother Niu says and follow the rules." Yin Baikong was very satisfied with Niu Yud's strict attitude. This was the kind of person who was worthy of a long-term cooperation. He immediately summoned Sikong Ju. Not long after, the latter came back with 5 people. Let's not talk about the long-winded greeting. Yin Baikong gave him a bag of pills. After seeing the 5,000 limit-breaking pills, Sikong Ju was immediately shocked and looked at his master with excitement. Master was indeed a master. Niu Yud was such a difficult person to talk to, but this old man could do it quietly. He casually took out 5 limit-breaking pills and handed them to the 5 disciples. Then, he poured out a pile of spirit stones for the 5 disciples to absorb. Yu Qianzhou watched calmly from the side. He was not afraid of exposing himself at all. He did not have the 7 treasures pill to break through the bottleneck of his cultivation, so they could test it however they wanted. The results of the test were very good. The 5 of them successfully increased their cultivation by 1 level. They were extremely grateful. Een Baikong smiled and waved his hand, signaling them to leave. After watching them leave the mountain, Een Baikong turned around and asked, "Brother Nyo, you said you were looking for Yu Qianqiu. Was it about the 7 treasure pill?" "Since I've promised, I'll definitely do it well." Yu Qianqiu smiled. "That kid was really hard to find, but I finally found him. I've already given him the 7 treasures pill." He also agreed to sell it to the World Trade Association at the original price of 2 million. He'll rush to the World Trade Association in a few days to participate in the treasure bowl gathering. Brother Een, just send someone to contact him at that time. When he mentioned the price, he carefully observed Een Baikong's expression. Who knew that Een Baikong would only be slightly startled, then immediately recovered his smile and said, "That's good. Once he arrives, I'll immediately send someone to find him." At this point, he asked in surprise, "He's willing to give up on the deal? Brother Nyo must have given him some other benefits, right?" "Of course." Yu Qianqiu nodded. Een Baikong saw that he was unwilling to divulge any benefits to Yu Qianqiu, so he did not linger on this topic. He changed the topic and asked, "When will the next batch of limit-breaking pills be obtained?" Yu Qianqiu muttered, "I've already made a deposit. Someone from the immortal world will rush to make it. I believe that in a few days, they'll be able to refine a large batch of limit-breaking pills. As long as you bring cash, you should be able to get the goods during the treasure bowl gathering." "Good." Een Baikong clapped his hands. "Brother Nyo, please wait for a few days. The headquarters doesn't have much spare money. We can use these few days to gather spirit stones. When the time comes, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble Brother Nyo to make another trip to the immortal world. It's not really troublesome. I'm also doing this to earn spirit stones." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. Een Baikong chuckled. After the two chatted for a while, Yu Qianqiu suddenly frowned. "I won't disturb Brother Een. I'll contact you when the time comes. I have to go down the mountain to collect the debt." Een Baikong was startled, then asked curiously, "Could it be that there's someone here who owes Brother Nyo money?" "Brother Een, you've forgotten already?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled and reminded, "That Sleeping Spring Brothel's madam wanted me to compose a poem. She said that she would repay me. I'll go see how she's going to repay me now." Een Baikong smiled awkwardly. That woman's charm was still fresh in his memory. He cupped his hands and smiled. "Brother Nyo's interest is not shallow. I won't send you off then. Go ahead, go ahead." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and threw out a flying sword. He then excitedly floated down the mountain. Watching him leave, Een Baikong silently sighed. Life was always a choice between gain and loss. In order to gain some, you have to give up some. Actually, to be able to reach this day, he had always been like this. Cutting off his thoughts about that woman, he gathered his thoughts and summoned Sikong-ju. The moment Sikong-ju arrived, he took out the storage bag containing the limit-breaking pills and asked, "Master, this is?" He still couldn't figure out what was going on. "I bought this from Nyo Yud for 1 million high-grade spirit stones each," Een Baikong said indifferently. Sikong-ju did some calculations and was immediately shocked. 5 billion high-grade spirit stones? Then he impatiently asked, "Master, didn't we spend 1 billion to recruit Nyo Yu to World Commerce Association? He should be refining for us for free. Why is he still collecting money? He's an immortal from the immortal world. What do we use to recruit him? Do we have the ability to recruit him? Moreover, the spirit herbs used to refine the limit-breaking pills are all from the immortal world. Where are we going to find all of them and in large quantities?" Een Baikong glanced at him. There were some things that he couldn't say to this disciple, so he said indifferently, "There's another story behind this. I'll tell you when the time is right." Sikong-ju respectfully responded. Looking at the limit-breaking pills in his hand, he immediately felt heavy. This was 5 billion high-grade spirit stones. He then asked, Master, should we start distributing these pills? He had already made up his mind. Such a good thing, if he were to distribute it, his disciples would definitely prioritize it. When the cornucopia gathering is held, sell it. Een Baikong squinted his eyes and said, Go and make arrangements now. Use the Commerce Association's distribution channels to spread the news that we're going to sell the limit-breaking pills at the cornucopia gathering. Remember, say that we're going to sell the limit-breaking pills in large quantities. Ah. Sikong Ju's expression froze. Then he hurriedly dissuaded, Master, you mustn't. The limit-breaking pills must not fall into the hands of other forces. Otherwise, it will be a fatal blow to our World Commerce Association. Een Baikong coldly glanced at him and snorted, Do you think I don't know the pros and cons? Just do as I say. I have my own plans. Sikong Ju was startled. Thinking about it, how could Master not understand the pros and cons? He definitely had other arrangements. He immediately bowed and accepted the order, but handed the storage bag back to Een Baikong. Master, it's not safe to leave this thing on me. It's better for Master to take care of it. He didn't dare to run around with such a precious thing. If he lost it, the consequences wouldn't be something he could bear. Een Baikong nodded slightly and put away the storage bag. After Sikong Ju left, he slowly walked to the pine tree and looked at the rolling clouds with a sinister smile on his face. After Yu Qianqiu went down the mountain, he wasn't in a hurry to go to the sleeping spring loft. Instead, he wandered around the streets of the cornucopia gathering. Actually, he wasn't really in the mood to play. It was just a habit of his every time he went to a place. He was used to familiarizing himself with the terrain of unfamiliar places in case of emergencies. His appearance immediately caused a commotion in the entire cornucopia gathering. One had to know that for a top expert like him, who would often show their face, let alone wander around the streets blindly. Although everyone was in awe, they still secretly sized him up in various ways. Yu Qianqiu didn't care. When he saw a new shop, he would wander in and take a look. As long as he felt that it was something useful, he would buy it wantonly. Spirit stones were thrown out, and piles of things were thrown towards Utopia. It was as if they were doing a shopping spree for Utopia. After sweeping up a few 100 million worth of goods, he stopped. If he continued to sell, he would definitely arouse Een Baikong's suspicion. After wandering around, he couldn't help but sigh. This cornucopia gathering was indeed a shopping paradise in the cultivation world. The variety was too damn complete. Moreover, there were all kinds of businesses. The World Commerce Association had even opened a casino, a pawn shop, a treasure house, and even a trading company that was starting to take the form of a bank. There was even a bodyguard business. In short, there were all kinds of businesses. They did whatever they wanted to make money. It was a dazzling sight. Yu Qianqiu really admired Een Baikong's business acumen. What a talent! The street in front of him was bustling with activity. Looking at the bustling scene, it was far more prosperous than the other streets. Yu Qianqiu looked left and right and found that this street was somewhat familiar. After thinking for a bit, wasn't this where the sleeping spring loft was? He didn't expect that after walking around, he would still end up here. However, he was a little puzzled. The last time he came here, it wasn't this lively. Could it be that something happened? With his hands behind his back, Yu Qianqiu walked over curiously. As soon as he entered the street, the crowd immediately parted to make a path for him to pass through without any obstacles. Ignoring the respectful gazes of the people on both sides, he looked left and right and looked around. Suddenly, he noticed a graceful woman walking out of the sleeping spring loft in front of him. She was exceptionally eye-catching on the street. She stood in the middle of the street with a charming smile on her face. It was none other than the beautiful proprietress of the sleeping spring loft, Yan Yu. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. A smile appeared on his face as he strolled over. I thought that senior had already left Cornucopia. I didn't expect to see you again. Yan Yu bowed. Chapter 608. Yu Qianqiu wasn't afraid of losing his status as a senior expert. He laughed without the slightest scruple and said, I haven't gotten the repayment you wanted, so how can I leave so easily? His hand had already wrapped around her waist and was caressing her up and down. His behavior made everyone speechless. Senior really knows how to joke. Yan Yu giggled and twisted, trying to take the opportunity to break free. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu was determined to take advantage of her and wouldn't let her leave? The two hugged and whispered to each other, then walked into the spring slumber loft under everyone's gaze. Before they entered the loft, there was a commotion on the street in the distance. The two stopped at the same time. The World Commerce Association wants to sell limit-breaking pills in large quantities at the cornucopia. That's impossible. Would they be willing to sell that thing? Why not? The World Commerce Association has already put up an announcement. The voices of the crowd kept coming. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously let go of Yan Yu's waist and muttered with a frown, what's Yin Baikong doing? He never believed that Yin Baikong would sell limit-breaking pills because the World Commerce Association couldn't just sit back and watch other forces grow stronger, let alone give others such an opportunity. Previously, he thought Yin Baikong was just saying it casually. Now that he even put up an announcement, it seemed like he was serious. Yan Yu took the opportunity to silently size up the frowning and contemplating him at a close distance. The more she looked, the more puzzled she became. Nyoye didn't give her the feeling of an old monster who had cultivated for more than 1,000 years. He lacked the air of an old man, but he was a soul formation final stage expert. It was really strange. It was said that when a woman saw the man she liked, all the other party's shortcomings could be seen as advantages. Could it be that she was thinking of love? Thinking of this, Yan Yu's cheeks couldn't help but flush slightly. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. He couldn't figure it out, so he didn't think about it for now. Then, he put on a grin and shamelessly put his arm around Yan Yu. The two of them kissed as they walked in. The surrounding men were envious and sighed inwardly. Raising one's cultivation was the way to go. There were many wastrels in the brothel, and the sounds of wild bees and butterflies were endless. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and chuckled, your business is booming. It's all your fault. Yan Yu rolled her eyes at him. What does that have to do with me? This is my first time here. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. To his surprise, Yan Yu did not take him upstairs, but directly passed through the hall to the backyard of the spring slumber building. The incessant sounds disappeared, and an elegant and unique bungalow sat quietly in the backyard. There was a small pond beside the bungalow. The lotus flowers in the pond were slender and beautiful. The scenery in the backyard was elegant, completely different from the style of the sleeping spring loft in front. Yu Qianqiu could not help but be slightly startled. Headliner Yen brought me here. Could it be that you want to have a secret affair with me? Yu Qianqiu cackled. His eyes were looking at places that he should not be looking at, very arrogant. It's all because of Senior's good deed. You've made my sleeping spring loft restless even if I wanted to. Yan Yu explained the reason why the sleeping spring loft was so popular. Then, she coquettishly said, I was afraid that I would disturb Senior's peace, so I brought Senior to my place. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He did not expect that his poem would make the sleeping spring loft so popular, but it was also within his expectations. Just imagine, with the fame of Niu Yud and Yin Baikong, if they joined hands and left a poem outside the sleeping spring loft, there would only be an endless stream of people coming to pay their respects. This is your place? Yu Qianqiu subconsciously asked. He looked around and walked to the outside of the elegant bungalow. He casually pushed the door open and entered. Yan Yu gritted her teeth as if she had made up her mind. A resolute expression flashed across her face as she braced herself and entered. As soon as she entered the door, she saw a pair of hands reaching out and forcefully pulling her in. Then, she heard the sound of the door closing. Yan Yu was startled. Although she was already prepared, she did not expect the other party to be so direct and impatient. She could not help but cry out, "What are you doing?" "Of course I'm asking for a reward. Didn't you already agree? Why are you still being so reserved?" Yu Qianqiu hugged her and laughed. Regardless of whether she agreed or not, he had already quickly stripped her clean and directly threw her to the side of the couch. That infinitely alluring and tender white body was covered in panic, causing a certain person to pounce over like a big bad wolf. Yan Yu was actually also at the early stage of tribulation passing, but at this time, she was panicking and did not know what to do. A brocade quilt was flipped up and covered the two of them. Yan Yu's cries of alarm rang out from inside, and not long after, a painful groan was suddenly heard. The flipping brocade quilt was startled by this painful groan and stopped. Yu Qianqiu's head stretched out from the quilt and looked at the beautiful face below him with a face full of astonishment. After a long time, he said dully, "Is this your first time?" Yan Yu bit her lips and stared at him with her big round eyes, appearing abnormally pure and bright, but she did not say a word. "You're in a place like this. How is this possible?" Yu Qianqiu did not dare to believe it. But her reaction, as well as the urgency when they first entered Melon Alley, made him feel that something was wrong. "What exactly is going on?" Yu Qianqiu asked again with half of his body propped up. However, Yan Yu still bit her lips and looked at him, not saying a word. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, "Damn it. It's already like this, let's discuss it after we're done." He pulled up the quilt, and the endless amorous and beautiful scene was completely revealed in the moans. After a long time, the two of them, who had been tossing and turning for a long time, finally stopped. They were covered with the same quilt and lay side by side. The comfort on Yu Qianqiu's face had not yet dispersed, but then he was startled. It was unknown what he thought of, but he abruptly lifted the quilt, startling Yan Yu so much that she shyly curled up together. Seeing the red spots on the bed, Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched for a long time. He powerlessly pulled the quilt and lay down. Looking at the ceiling, he muttered absent-mindedly, "What the hell, how is this possible?" To be honest, Yu Qianqiu did not have the slightest interest in ordinary brothel girls. But this Yan Yu was indeed very attractive, which greatly aroused his lustful heart. Thus, he had the thought of playing around, and after that, they would not owe each other anything. Who knew that she was actually a virgin? It was simply too inconceivable. A brothel madam. No matter how he looked at her, she did not look like someone who had not experienced the world. Failure. You did it on purpose. Tell me. Who instructed you to do it? Yu Qianqiu turned his head to look at her and asked in a deep voice. Thinking back to the series of events that had happened previously, this lady boss seemed to have designs on him. He was not the kind of person who would be unable to move when he saw a woman. How could he let his guard down? Lying on the side, Yan Yu, who had just experienced the world and was so shy that she did not dare to move, stiffened when she heard that. She bit her lips so hard that they almost bled. She said in a trembling voice, "I did it on purpose. I took a fancy to Senior Nyo's profound cultivation, and wanted to climb up the high branch." Humph. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. Expressionlessly, he quickly got up and put on his clothes. Without hesitation, he opened the door and went out. He did not even close the door. Yan Yu, who was lying on the bed with half of her breasts exposed, did not move at all. The flush on her face had long disappeared, and in its place was a deathly gray. She had lost her usual radiance, and her eyes were dull and lifeless. Two streams of clear tears flowed down her temples and dripped down her hair. "Why are you crying? Is it because I've seen through your plans?" The voice that had clearly left just now sounded again. Yan Yu turned her head to look. Who else could it be other than Nyo Yud? She had clearly heard him leave, but she did not know when he had returned. He stood expressionlessly by the bedside and looked at her, covering her chest with the quilt. Yan Yu sat up and said angrily, get out of here. Don't let me see you again. It will be as you wish. However, there are some words that you must remember." Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, "Leave cornucopia as soon as possible. The further the better. It's best to find a place where no one can find you and live in seclusion." How could the furious Yan Yu listen to these words? She shouted again, "I don't need you to tell me what to do. Get out." Bitch, shut up. Yu Qianqiu was furious. He grabbed the brocade quilt and threw it to the side. Yan Yu calmed down a lot after being fooled by him. She quickly took a pillow to cover her body that was not easily exposed. Yu Qianqiu pointed at her and warned her word by word, "You remember this. Leave cornucopia as soon as possible. The further the better. Find a place where no one can find you and live in seclusion. Do you understand?" Yan Yu was not stupid. She was just blinded by shame and anger just now. After calming down a little, she immediately heard some deeper meaning in Yu Qianqiu's words. Is something going to happen in cornucopia? Is he warning me in advance? Yan Yu's eyes suddenly burst with a strange look. She stared at Yu Qianqiu with a somewhat affectionate expression. Yu Qianqiu was almost speechless by her gaze. He immediately waved his hand and scolded, "Damn it. Idiot woman, I can't be bothered with you." With that, he turned around and left. "Wait!" Yan Yu shouted. "What?" Yu Qianqiu turned his head back angrily. The white and delicate body on the bed was still very tempting. So he bent down to pick up the quilt on the ground and threw it back on the bed. Yan Yu pulled the quilt and wrapped herself in it. She stretched out a jade arm and pointed at Yu Qianqiu's head. She whispered, "I accidentally scratched the back of your left ear just now. Your disguise was exposed. You'd better fix it before you leave." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He raised his hand and touched the back of his ear. Sure enough, there was some injustice. He couldn't help but be shocked. Fortunately, he softened his heart and came back. If he went out and met someone with ill intentions, he was afraid that he would be exposed immediately. He immediately fixed it in a hurry. After that, he immediately fled. Before leaving, he didn't forget to throw a curse, "Damn it. Women are really the source of trouble. Women can't be touched casually." Yan Yu, who was wrapped in the quilt, gritted her teeth and tightened her face. After Yu Qianqiu fled, especially after hearing his curse, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She burst out laughing. She covered her head with the quilt and hid under it, giggling non-stop. After a long time, her head popped out. She stared outside the door with eyes full of happiness. She bit her lip and said, "I don't care who you are, and I don't care what will happen to cornucopia. Anyway, I won't leave. If you have the ability, leave me alone. Give me a reason to give up." Chapter 609. In the house halfway up the God of Wealth Peak, Yu Qianqiu shut himself in his room. He felt great when he was indulging himself just now, but now he was like a youth who had lost his footing. He leaned back in his chair and was very unhappy. Along the way, he thought about killing Yan Yu to silence her, but after a few hesitations, he couldn't bring himself to do so. If it was an ordinary piece of trash, he would really kill her after he was done with her. But she was a, damn it. Annoyed, he then became absent-minded again. Everything was fine, but he kept thinking about the pond in the courtyard with the slender and elegant lotus flowers. He murmured, "Untainted from the mud? Pa." Suddenly, he gave himself a slap and shook his head, deciding not to think about it anymore. Since she had pointed out his flaws, she probably wouldn't reveal his secret. He was worrying for nothing. "I'll be fine after a nap." Yu Qianqiu comforted himself, then listlessly tossed and turned on the bed. Millennium Kingdom's blue palace was bustling with activity. With Pei Fong, Qi Zhejuan and O Yangda as the leaders, they had invited the lords of dozens of countries to conspire in the blue palace. With Niu Yud's alliance, the world commerce was like adding wings to a tiger. Imagine, if the world commerce's strength soared with the help of the limit-breaking pill, how could these people who didn't see eye to eye with Yin Baikong have a good ending? Thus, everyone prepared to unite and take advantage of the world commerce's fledgling strength. The initiator of this matter was Pei Fong. Not to mention the fact that Yin Baikong was his enemy, that Niu Yud had killed his disciple in front of everyone in the cornucopia, and even said that he would wait for Fatty Pei. How was this any different from slapping his face? This Nyo Yud with unfathomable cultivation was now in cahoots with Een Bai Kong. With just his family's strength, there was no hope of revenge. Thus, he jumped up and down to contact the powers that didn't see eye to eye with the world commerce, stating how powerful they were and suggesting everyone to play together. Don't worry everyone. With us 66 powers working together, we can definitely wipe out the world commerce in one move. Pei Fong's fat face shook as he waved his broken hand and said confidently. Someone questioned, Pei Fong, now that Een Bai Kong has Nyo Yud's help, do you really think we can defeat the world commerce? I heard that Nyo Yud's cultivation isn't low. He might even be stronger than Een Bai Kong. That's not a problem. Pei Fong pointed at Chi Jiojuan and Ouyang De and said, leave Een Bai Kong and Nyo Yud to the three of us. You guys quickly deal with Een Bai Kong's two spirit-severing disciples. The other late-stage passing tribulation cultivators won't be able to stop us. In short, we have to work together to kill Een Bai Kong and Nyo Yud. We can't give them another chance to rise again. That person shook his head and said, a centipede dies but does not fall down. The World Commerce Association has deep roots and the combined forces of the various countries' branches are not small. If we were to launch a life and death counterattack, of course, those insects and shrimps wouldn't be able to do anything to us, but our forces would definitely suffer a heavy blow. I'm afraid that we wouldn't be able to recover in a short period of time. We have to know that there are still wolves eyeing us like tigers eyeing their prey. Will it take advantage of our weakness to bite us? Yes. This is indeed a problem. Everyone nodded in agreement. If everyone was fighting a tiger with all their might, only to be bitten in the back by a wolf, then it wouldn't be worth it. Pei Fong laughed heartily. Everyone, this isn't a problem. I've already thought of a solution. Our 66 forces can make an oath together. If anyone dares to bite us in the back while we're attacking the World Commerce Association, the 66 forces will look for them together to settle the score. This oath can be made public to intimidate those with ill intentions. Let me ask you, who would be able to bear the wrath of us 66 spirit-severing experts? Also, we have to declare that while we're attacking the World Commerce Association's headquarters, the World Commerce Association's branches within each country's borders are free to be attacked by any country. Whoever takes them down will have that piece of meat. Everyone, think about it. Without the World Commerce Association's headquarters to hold the line, the branches would turn from a thorn in the side to a free piece of fat meat. Would the various forces ignore this? So, this problem isn't a problem. It's already been easily solved. Although his words were pleasant to hear, the people present weren't so easily fooled. Someone immediately sneered, what about Bing Qingzi and Hu Changshou? The two of them are the biggest problem. They've always stuck together, so how would they sit back and watch us destroy Een Bai Kong? Once the two of them take action, along with Een Bai Kong and Nyo Yud, there should be 4 spirit-severing late-stage experts. Are the 3 of you sure you're a match for the 4 of them? I'm just afraid that we won't know who will be the one to destroy who. Once the 3 of you fail and the 4 of them join forces to attack us, I'm afraid that many of you here won't be able to return. Don't be impatient. Pei Fong waved his hand at him and chuckled, the 3 of us have already thought of this, so we contacted the 2 of them in advance. If it was any other time, they would definitely lend a hand to Een Bai Kong. But this time, Een Bai Kong has made a fatal mistake. He shouldn't have been too ambitious and wanted to monopolize the limit-breaking pill. He wanted the World Commerce Association to dominate the world. Forget about us, even Bing Qingzi and Hu Changshou wouldn't agree to this. The 2 of them have already made it clear that they don't wish to see someone dominate the world and harm their interests. When everyone heard this, they quickly whispered to each other and nodded continuously. Clearly, they thought that the chances of success were very high. But after a while, there was another disagreement. After defeating the World Commerce Association, the distribution of profits became a problem again. Just as they were about to quarrel, someone suddenly walked in from outside the palace and said, everyone, stop daydreaming. The meat of the World Commerce Association looks tempting, but it's not something we can chew on right now. The Blue Palace immediately quietened down. Everyone looked at him with different expressions. This person had a handsome face and was dressed in a fluffy snow-white robe. He was clean and elegant. Half of his body was hidden in thick white fur. He had an extraordinary bearing and appeared graceful and luxurious. He was Lord Lu Nangua, Passion Lake Misty Rain House's Yunantian. Pei Fong narrowed his eyes. Brother Yu, what do you mean by that? Could it be that you want to withdraw? Everyone, don't misunderstand. Yunantian shook his head at everyone. Yin Baikong isn't as simple as everyone thinks. I just went out and received news from my disciples. The World Commerce Association has just officially announced that they will sell a large amount of the limit-breaking pill at the cornucopia and won't monopolize it. In this way, Bing Qingzi and Hu Changshou have no reason not to help him at the critical moment. Yes. I believe everyone will soon receive news from below, so I don't need to say more. Sure enough, after a while, a disciple of the Blue Palace quickly walked over and conveyed the news to Pei Fong. Pei Fong's fat face immediately turned the color of a pig's liver. He had spent so much effort to connect so many people and was about to succeed, but Yin Baikong's casual release of a piece of news resolved it. It seemed like he had worked for a long time in vain. Brother Pei, I have something to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Yunantian cupped his hands in obeisance. His fluffy snow-white robe surrounded by steady footsteps, he took the lead and left the Blue Palace. As soon as he left, people began to bid farewell to Pei Fong one after another and hurried back to their homes. Since the limit-breaking pill could be bought, they naturally had to rush back to gather spirit stones and strive to buy as many as they could. Who would want to stay here and accompany Pei Fong in daydreaming? The news that the World Commerce Association was going to sell a large amount of the limit-breaking pill immediately caused an uproar in the entire cultivation world. All the forces found it hard to believe. Would Yin Baikong be so kind? Although they were suspicious, they did not relax their hands. They prepared to gather some spirit stones first. If they did not prepare and if it was true, they would not have enough money and could only watch helplessly as the limit-breaking pill was bought by someone else. Wouldn't they regret it to death? Moreover, although the World Commerce Association was selling a large amount of the limit-breaking pill, they could not supply it in unlimited quantities. Moreover, they did not know the price yet. Moreover, the World Commerce Association would definitely keep most of it for their own use. As for how many they would sell, it was still unknown. However, there were many people who needed it. On the obedient island of the demon domain, Nongzhu, Ze, Hibiscus, and Lady Mu all raised their heads and looked around, not knowing what they were looking for. Suddenly, there was an explosion in the distant 1,000-mile lake. White waves rose to the sky and a flowing light shot out from the explosion into the sky. Then, it hovered in the sky like a dragon. When it flew over the sky, it brought with it the roar of wind and thunder. Its speed was unbelievably fast, leaving a long flowing light behind it. It was as bright as a comet, as if it was going to break through the sky. Its momentum was truly astonishing. The dark clouds above the 1,000-mile lake were stirred up by the aura of the flying sword, rolling up and down. The demons and ghosts were frightened and trembling. They all looked in the direction of the obedient island, not knowing what the punishment envoy was going to do. The flowing light that disappeared into the distance suddenly reappeared in everyone's line of sight with a shoo sound, as if it was going to tear through the air. The point of starlight grew larger and larger, rushing towards the obedient island. The point of starlight was at least a few hundred meters away from the lake's surface, but the momentum created a 10-meter deep trench on the lake's surface. It broke through the waves rapidly. Obviously, it was coming for Nongzhu and the others. Ze and the others' faces paled and they subconsciously retreated. Nongzhu's pupils suddenly shrank. She suddenly turned around and shouted, "Bai Changchun, are you crazy?" Bai Changchun, who had a lean face and was dressed in a green robe, proudly stood on the roof with his hands behind his back. His expression was calm. The point of starlight stirred up huge waves that rose to a height of several hundred meters and rushed towards the obedient island. Only then did Bai Changchun wave his sleeves. Bang! The huge waves were instantly shaken into a sheet of white and scattered back. A flowing light passed through the water curtain and floated beside Bai Changchun. When the flowing light faded, a simple and unadorned flying sword could be seen floating in the air. The girls looked at each other, but Nongju's eyes lit up. She teleported to the roof and asked with a smile, "Old Bai, what do you think of this sword?" "It's barely passable." Bai Changchun replied indifferently. The flying sword flashed into his storage pouch. Chapter 610. Barely enough? Nongju was shocked and then smiled bitterly. "Forget it, we don't have anything in common. Tell me about your disciple." "He's with Yin Baikong, making a limit-breaking pill and stirring up a storm in the cultivation world." "What does he want?" "That's his own business. Why do you worry?" Bai Changchun looked into the distance with his hands behind his back. Wen Lanfeng sent a message saying that he wants to go to the cornucopia. He doesn't know that Niu Yud is Yu Qianqiu yet. "I'm afraid it will cause some misunderstanding," Nongju said. Bai Changchun flashed down and walked towards the house. "Say what you want to say, don't beat around the bush." Nongju followed him and smiled. "I know I can't hide it from you. Hibiscus wants to see Yu Qianqiu, but she's too embarrassed to ask you." Bai Changchun stopped and turned to look at Hibiscus. "You want to go to the cornucopia?" Hibiscus came to call her master anxiously, but she couldn't speak for a long time. She just nodded embarrassedly, indicating that she wanted to go. Nongju grinned and said, "I'm going to take these two girls to broaden their horizons." But this time, Yu Qianqiu made too much of a ruckus. "I heard from Wen Lanfeng that many lords from various kingdoms will go there for the restriction-breaking pill. With so many monsters gathering in the cornucopia, I'm worried that something will go wrong if I take these two girls with me. Don't beat around the bush." Bai Changchun looked at her coldly. Nongju's expression froze, and then she rubbed her hands and said cheerfully, "You know, you are the only one who can control those monsters. For the sake of Furong's safety, can I borrow the thing on your waist?" She pointed to a black jade pendant with cloud patterns on Bai Changchun's waist. It was only the size of half a palm and was engraved with the word Bai. Bai Changchun stared at Hibiscus and didn't say anything. He untied the jade pendant on his waist. He waved his hand and released a cloud of golden mist. His fingers shot a spell at the jade pendant. The golden mist surged and instantly drilled into the jade pendant. Then, he opened his palm, and the jade pendant gently floated towards Hibiscus. Unexpectedly, Nongju grabbed it and turned it over and over in her hand. She was so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. She clicked her tongue and said, "This is a good thing." N. Bai Changchun stared at Nongju coldly. The smile on Nongju's face froze. She awkwardly threw the jade pendant to Furong, waved her hand and said, "Hang it on your body quickly. This is the amulet given by your teacher." Hibiscus obediently tied the jade pendant to her waist. At this time, Bai Changchun said to her, "If you encounter any trouble that you can't solve, you can inject your Jinqi to activate the thing inside." "Yes." Hibiscus bowed respectfully. Ziyi's face was filled with envy as she stared at the jade pendant on her waist. Nongju couldn't bear to see her daughter like this, so she looked around Bai Changchun's body to see if there was anything more memorable to pick up. Bai Changchun could not be bothered with him. Without another word, he turned around and went in. Lingfang Valley was a place with a very special geographical location. It was adjacent to 3 countries at the same time, and Bai one country was one of them. However, it didn't belong to any of the 3 countries, so it was surrounded by the 3 countries. The area was actually not big. It was just a continuous valley that was lush and green all year round. Flowers bloomed and withered. Mountain springs and streams filled the valley. It was like a paradise, very elegant and quiet. Outside the mountain, there was a mountain road that led into the valley. On the road, there were common people coming and going. Although it was a mountain road, it was very smooth. As long as there was a pothole, there would be people who would volunteer to fill it with rocks. On both sides of the mountain road, there were many stone tablets, which led to the depths of the valley. In the depths of the valley, there was a continuous stretch of houses, where the fragrance of medicine floated all year round. Outside the houses, there were many men and women who were busy. There were many common people sitting in the tents that were built. Most of them came from the surrounding 3 countries, and they had traveled long distances to seek medical treatment. All the treatments here were free of charge. There was only one rule: if you are sick, see the doctor. If you are not sick, don't stay. Although the place was a little far, to the poor people, it was a blessed land. Behind the continuous stretch of houses was a stone mountain. On one of the smooth mountain walls, the 2 words, "Medicine Hut," were carved, which were very conspicuous. There were many caves in the belly of the mountain for people to live in. Inside the belly of the mountain, there was a winding stone staircase that led straight to the top. The top of the mountain was very flat, and there was a small courtyard. A tall and thin man in gray walked out of the courtyard. His face was handsome and indifferent. People in the cultivation world called him Old Ninth Exion. He was the oldest among the 9 brothers of the Exion family, but he had the highest cultivation level. He had already reached the early stage of soul formation. He lightly walked toward the edge of the cliff. On the edge of the cliff, there was a protruding mountain rock that was suspended in the air. On top of the rock stood a graceful woman in a fluttering green robe. She was staring at the people coming and going on the mountain road in the distance. This woman was one of the 4 great people in the cultivation world, a middle-stage soul formation cultivator, the master of Lingfang Valley, the world's #1 genius doctor and the world's #1 beauty, Lu Yanqing. Old Ninth Exion walked to the edge of the cliff and looked at the graceful figure with her beautiful hair fluttering in the wind. A trace of love flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared slightly and was deeply hidden. Then he bowed and said, "Master, I heard that you are going to the cornucopia. Are you going to buy something? Then why bother you to go in person? Disciple will go." In his impression, because his master's appearance was the best in the world, she would cause a commotion wherever she went. So she had never liked that kind of chaotic place with too many people. But he didn't know why this time she had to go to the most lively and mixed-up cornucopia. Lu Yanqing, who had her back to him, said lightly, "I want to see what's so magical about the limit-breaking pill that it can forcibly improve people's cultivation. Medicine is 30% poisonous. If the medicinal properties are not balanced, I don't know if there will be any side effects." Her clear voice was touching. "In that case, why don't disciple accompany Master? I can also help Master." Old Ninth Exion said respectfully. "No need, you should stay and look after the house. That way I can rest assured. I have already informed Old Third to accompany me." Lu Yanqing said. "Third brother?" Old Ninth Exion was stunned. He couldn't figure out why Master would pick a wild person like Third brother to accompany her to the cornucopia. At this moment, a figure swept over from behind the mountain. After landing, he trotted over and bowed to Lu Yanqing's back. "Master, I'm here." If it wasn't Old Third Exion, who else could it be? Old Ninth Exion sniffed and looked at Old Third Exion's greasy hands. He frowned and said, "Third brother, you went to the back mountain to hunt again? Hee hee. You haven't tasted Yu Qianshou's barbecue skills. The taste is really good. Unfortunately, I can't get that flavor no matter how I roast it. It's really a pity." Old Third Exion sighed. His face revealed a look of reminiscence of the days when they roasted together. "Yu Qianshou again. What benefits did that Yu Qianshou give you? You talk about him every day. You're not tired of talking about him, but I'm tired of listening to him." Old Ninth Exion said with some displeasure. "Hee hee. You haven't been in contact with that kid." Old Third Exion gave a thumbs up and praised, "That kid is affectionate and loyal. He's definitely a man among men. Third brother, I like him." "Oh. Then I'd like to meet him when I have the chance." Old Ninth Exion said with slight sarcasm. Old Third Exion was about to refute a few words, but he heard the master in front of him say, "Stop arguing, Old Third, let's go." The green shadow on top of the hanging cliff flew away. Third brother Exion glanced at Ninth brother Exion, and then immediately followed after him. The cornucopia was about to start. The whole cornucopia could be said to be very lively. This was the once-in-a-decade trading event in the cultivation world. If you wanted to sell something at a good price, it was now. Taking advantage of the arrival of those rich people, it was the time to make money. Therefore, not only in the hands of the various forces, but also those cultivators who specialized in trading also took out the treasures they had bought over the years, ready to sell them at the cornucopia. In the previous cornucopia, there were many stories of poor rogue cultivators becoming rich overnight. Often, those poor rogue cultivators usually got an inconspicuous thing, but it was a rare thing for refining magic weapons and refining elixirs. They did not expect to sell it at a high price at the cornucopia and make a fortune. The most bizarre thing was that, often, a rare but worthless little thing at the cornucopia, because the children of several wealthy families fought for face and wealth, would inflate something worth a few hundred upper-grade spirit stones to millions of upper-grade spirit stones. Then, the seller became rich overnight without knowing it. These stories made people palpitate with excitement. Whether it was those poor rogue cultivators or the grassroots disciples of various sects, as long as they collected something strange, they would bring it to the cornucopia to try their luck. In this way, the liveliness of the cornucopia could be imagined. The rich came to spend money wantonly, and the poor came with the dream of getting rich. The prices of restaurants and inns skyrocketed, and most of them were occupied by the children of wealthy families. The World Chamber of Commerce also set aside 2 squares of stalls for rent in those places that used to be on the periphery and no one cared about. Starting from the location near the center and extending outwards, the stalls ranged from 10 upper-grade spirit stones to 1 upper-grade spirit stone per day. In the 10 days of the cornucopia, the World Chamber of Commerce made a net profit of millions of upper-grade spirit stones every day. In previous years, some rogue cultivators did not want to pay rent in order to save money, so they carried things with them and peddled them in the cornucopia. But if they were discovered by the law enforcement patrol team of the World Chamber of Commerce, it would be bad, and everything on them would be confiscated. Think about it, how could a cultivator who could not even afford the rent have the background to go against the World Chamber of Commerce? If their things were confiscated, they would not even have a place to cry. As a result, many rogue cultivators would pool together to rent stalls to sell things. In fact, every time the cornucopia came down, the World Chamber of Commerce was the most profitable. There was no doubt about this. There were some businesses in the cornucopia that were monopolized by the World Chamber of Commerce, the local snake, and did not allow others to open a second one, such as the casino. There were some businesses that only the World Chamber of Commerce had the ability to open, such as the Spirit Stones Trading Company. With the World Chamber of Commerce's branches in various countries, you could withdraw and withdraw spirit stones at will. The spirit stones stored in the cornucopia could be taken out in Daeong Kingdom. Chapter 6:11. Of course, as far as Yu Qianqiu knew, although this spirit stone trading company already had the embryonic form of a bank from his previous life, it was clearly not so perfect yet. There would be no interest when spirit stones were deposited. Instead, one would have to pay a certain percentage of remuneration when withdrawing. This was because many people carried large amounts of spirit stones on them and felt unsafe, so they would rather pay some remuneration to the trading company and withdraw them here. For example, if an itinerant cultivator made a windfall at the treasure bowl gathering, but with his cultivation and background, once he left the treasure bowl without the protection of the World Trading Company, he would likely be robbed. What should he do? No problem, the Spirit Stone Trading Company would provide you with convenience. You only needed to pay a small portion of the remuneration and deposit a large amount of spirit stones in the trading company. When traveling, if you lacked money, you could withdraw it at any time from the World Trading Company's branch. It was up to you to withdraw as much or as little as you wanted. It didn't matter if it was distributed multiple times. The Spirit Stone Trading Company would never embezzle a single spirit stone from you. In terms of business reputation, the World Trading Company could be said to be the model for the entire cultivation world. Due to the daily fighting and death in the cultivation world, it was said that people often died before they had the chance to take out their spirit stones to enjoy. If no one provided the correct information to take them out, then these spirit stones would naturally become ownerless. It was rumored that the World Trading Company could earn over 100 million high-grade spirit stones from this windfall every year. If your cultivation was low and you found some treasure at the treasure bowl gathering, you might be robbed on your way home. No problem, as long as you could afford the remuneration, the World Trading Company's escort company would provide protection and help you send it back. If the protection failed, the World Trading Company would compensate you according to the valuation. In short, if you had any problems with money or property, you could seek help from the World Trading Company. As long as you could provide the corresponding remuneration, the World Trading Company would provide you with a full range of services, and their reputation was absolutely guaranteed. This was the World Trading Company founded by Yin Baikong. Such a huge business giant, doing business in both the cultivation world and the secular world at the same time, made people jealous and envious. At the same time, they couldn't help but admire it. The flow of people in the treasure bowl increased dramatically. One passage was no longer enough, so the other 7 sealed passages were opened. 8 passages were opened together to cater to the merchants from all over the world. All the experts of World Commerce's headquarters had come out in full force, and they had even transferred quite a few from outside branches to keep a close watch on the movements of the entire cornucopia. If an average person dared to cause trouble, that was simply courting death. On the God of Fortune Peak, Sikongju and Jing Yuankong were constantly reporting all sorts of important news to Yin Baikong. In the World Chamber of Commerce, Sikongju was in charge of external affairs while Jing Yuankong was in charge of internal affairs. Learning that nearly 300 lords had sent messages saying that they would be coming to this world's cornucopia, a smile appeared on Yin Baikong's face. Those were nearly 300 of the richest people in the cultivation world. Everyone knew what they were after. It would be hard for the World Commerce not to make a fortune this time. Yin Baikong was deep in thought under the pine tree on the peak. Sikongju rushed over from the foot of the mountain and cupped his fists. Master, by Wan Nations Wen Rui sent a message that Wen Lanfeng will be visiting Cornucopia. In addition, Xan Laojiu from the Spirit Fong Valley sent a message saying that Lu Yanqing is already on the way to the Cornucopia, and hopes that we can make careful arrangements. Yin Baikong was slightly startled. Wen Lanfeng coming was expected. After all, he was also a lord. For the future of the Wen family, it would be hard for him to resist the temptation of the restriction-breaking pill. But Lu Yanqing would come, but it was a little out of his expectations. That woman had participated in a cornucopia many years ago, and had never come again. Everyone knew that this woman liked peace and quiet, and did not like such a chaotic scene. Seems like the temptation of the restriction-breaking pill is not ordinary. Yin Baikong couldn't help but burst into laughter. Master, the lords from various countries have arrived. Do we need to entertain them? Sikongju asked. Yin Baikong lightly waved his hand. No need. They all have shops here, and their own people will arrange it. It's not good for us to entertain them one by one, we don't have the time. If there's anything, they will naturally come find me. Of course, we still have to give these people face, and treat them differently from ordinary people. And all you have to do is send a thank you card along with a few words about our poor hospitality. Understood. Sikongju nodded, then frowned. Master, we won't keep a single one of the 5,000 restriction-breaking pills. Are we really going to sell them all? I was just about to tell you about this. Yin Baikong looked at the surging sea of clouds in the distance, narrowed his eyes, and said, immediately put out another notice. Announce that the price of the restriction-breaking pill is 2 million high-grade spirit stones. Also, make an explanation, because there are only 5,000 restriction-breaking pills refined for the first time, it's not enough to meet the demand. In order not to offend people by favoritism, those who are sincere in buying will have to pay half of the deposit, 1 million high-grade spirit stones for each pill, no credit allowed. The other half will be paid when the goods arrive. Hearing this, Sikongju's eyes immediately lit up, and he somewhat understood his master's plan. He cupped his hands and said, Master is wise, I will immediately arrange it. There's one more thing. Yin Baikong frowned, the effects of the restriction-breaking pill must also be announced in detail. This pill can only increase cultivation, but it can't break through bottlenecks. Make it clear on the notice that we will be selling a large amount of 7 treasure pills that can break through bottlenecks. As for the price, it will be the same as the restriction-breaking pill, 2 million high-grade spirit stones for one. Sikong-ju was stunned. Master, didn't you say that the price of our 7 treasure pill is 2 million high-grade spirit stones for one? Are you going to sell it at the original price? I have my own plans. In Baikong's eyes flickered. To him, the 7 treasure pill was something that could stop the restriction-breaking pill from increasing his cultivation. In other words, this was the reason why he dared to sell a large amount of restriction-breaking pills without fear of other forces surpassing him. Most importantly, the 7 treasure pill was not directly sold to him by Nyo Yud. If it was, then it would be easy. He was still confident in Nyo Yud's business reputation. However, the 7 treasure pill had to go through Yu Qianzhou's hands before it could enter his hands. Although Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was not much, he was a complete madman. There was probably nothing that he did not dare to do. That guy was too daring, somewhat lawless. He actually dared to kill more than 2,000 people from various countries without considering the consequences. Even if he was to do this, he would have to think twice. Originally, Yu Qianzhou wanted to rely on this thing to make money, but in the end, his business was snatched away by him. If he saw that he was using the 7 treasure pill for profit, who knew if that madman would be jealous? What if that guy threw caution to the wind and decided to sell it to him instead of giving it to him? With Wen Lanfeng backing him up, he really could not do anything to him. Therefore, in order to make that madman feel better, he decided to sell it at the original price. The other party saw that he was not making money and naturally would not have any objections. In short, the most important thing was to control the source of the 7 treasure pill. He must not use it to make money, otherwise, the result would be disastrous. If he wanted to make money, he would be able to make a fortune with the restriction-breaking pill. What is Nyo Yu doing? In Baikong asked. Sikong-ju smiled bitterly and said, he is now together with the Sleeping Spring Brothel's madam, practically living in the Sleeping Spring Brothel. The Sleeping Spring Brothel's business has also become abnormally hot because of him, and the price has skyrocketed. Originally, one would only need to spend a few high-grade spirit stones to make a living, but now, without 1,000 high-grade spirit stones, it is hard to even enter the Sleeping Spring Brothel. But even so, there are still people scrambling like ducks, taking pride in being able to book a prostitute of the Sleeping Spring Brothel. Just today alone, the law enforcement squad went to the Sleeping Spring Brothel 5 times, because both sides fought over a prostitute. In Baikong was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and said, this guy. He then instructed, take care of the matter regarding the notice, then personally go to the Sleeping Spring Brothel and invite him over. I have something to discuss with him. While they were talking about Yu Qianzhou here, Yu Qianzhou himself was in the backyard of the Spring Slumber building with Yan Yu, making love to each other to the death. They were sweating profusely. After that, the amorous Yan Yu was like an octopus clinging onto Yu Qianzhou's chest. Little slut, when are you planning to leave? Yu Qianzhou asked as he caressed her plump bosom. After hinting at Yan Yu last time, he once again strolled around the Sleeping Spring Brothel, only to find that this woman was still doing business as usual, and had no intention of leaving. He immediately gnashed his teeth in hatred. This woman was too disobedient, so he accidentally became a regular customer of this backyard. Why should I leave? Yan Yu's eyes flashed with craftiness as she said, since no one cares, it's the same wherever you go. It's better to stay in the cornucopia, at least there's a guarantee of safety. Yu Qianzhou immediately became furious, pushing her smooth body away, sat up and stared at her, saying in a deep voice, I'll be frank with you. I'm just playing with you, don't think that I'll do anything to you. If anything happens, don't think that I'll protect you. Yan Yu was not angry because of his words, nor did she talk back to him. She pulled up the quilt to cover her plump bosom, sat up with a smile, and said, if I want to leave, I have to take advantage of the cornucopia to earn more money. Otherwise, what will I do in the future? I have no one to rely on. Yu Qianzhou was startled when he heard this, frowned, and said, I'll give you 100 million upper-grade spirit stones, leave here quickly. Yan Yu shook her head and said, although I'm in the Sleeping Spring brothel, I have my principles, and I will never sell myself. You and I are willing. If I take your money, what's the difference between me and selling myself? Don't force me to sell myself. Yu Qianshou was speechless, and he couldn't bring himself to say that he would give her money. After thinking for a while, he said to her, raise the price again, increase the minimum consumption of the Sleeping Spring brothel by 100 times. Once you've earned enough money, leave quickly. Yan Yu was stunned, and she cried out involuntarily, you just made me increase it by 100 times yesterday, from 10 upper-grade spirit stones to 1,000, and now it's increased by 100 times again. Wouldn't that be 100,000 upper-grade spirit stones? Will there still be people coming? Damn it. There are more rich people than you can imagine. Besides, with Mai and Yin Baikang's face, it's definitely worth this price. Yu Qianshou pulled her quilt away, and drove her away. Go quickly, time is spirit stones, once you've earned enough, get lost. Chapter 6:12. After tidying up, Yan Yu quickly went to the front hall to make arrangements for the price increase. When the notice for the minimum consumption of 100,000 upper-grade spirit stones was posted, like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, the news quickly spread in Cornucopia and everyone thought that Sleeping Spring Loft had gone crazy. It immediately attracted a lot of people to Sleeping Spring Loft. Everyone wanted to see if someone would be so generous for a prostitute. However, to everyone's surprise, there was still an endless stream of customers. Yan Yu stood in front of the door and watched the crowd's reaction with a smile. Seeing this, she immediately relaxed. A few cultivators in brocade clothes surrounded an arrogant middle-aged man and squeezed into the crowd. The people clearing the way kept yelling, people in front, make way. Don't block the door. The people who were pushed aside saw their clothes and immediately recognized them as disciples of East Nation's Cloud Palace. They couldn't afford to offend them and quickly moved to the side. Some even recognized the middle-aged man in the middle and whispered, isn't that Hu Changshou's third son, Hu Tianyun? Friend, please make way. The person clearing the way patted the shoulder of the person in front. The person who was patted turned around and glanced at them coldly. So you're a disciple of Cloud Palace. Too bad this Sleeping Spring Loft doesn't belong to your family. Why should I make way? The person clearing the way glanced at his bright yellow clothes and frowned. He turned around and looked behind him. Hu Tianyun took 2 steps forward and glanced at the person's bright yellow clothes. He said arrogantly, so you're a disciple of Junlin Palace. This Sleeping Spring Loft is a place to spend money and have fun. I don't think the onlookers should block the way of the customers, right? The crowd became excited. Hu Changshou and Qi Jiujuan were both soul formation final stage cultivators. Now that they were facing each other, there might be a big show to watch. How do you know I'm here to watch and not to spend money and have fun? The disciple of Junlin Palace retorted. Both sides had powerful backgrounds. He obviously couldn't weaken the sect's reputation. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to explain himself when he returned. Oh. You're only nascent soul realm early stage. May I ask which generation of disciple of Junlin Palace are you? Hu Tianyun glanced at the Sleeping Spring Loft sign and said arrogantly, look carefully. The minimum fee is 100,000 top-grade spirit stones. If it's inconvenient, please step aside. Don't block the customers behind you. What he was implying was, can you afford it? The expression of the disciple of the monarch's descent palace changed slightly. He snorted coldly and did not say anything else. Under everyone's gaze, he braced himself and strode into the spring slumber loft. Why are you pretending to be rich when you don't have money? Why bother? Hu Yuntian seemed to mutter, but the people around him heard it clearly. The disciples of the Heavenly Peak Cloud Palace all laughed and escorted him to the door. Hu Yuntian walked to the door and paused for a moment. His gaze fell on the poem on the slanted wall. He recited, spring sleeps without knowing the dawn, everywhere I hear birds chirping. The sound of wind and rain at night, the number of fallen flowers is unknown. It is indeed a good poem. Just this poem alone should increase the value of the Sleeping Spring Loft by 100 times. It is not a place that ordinary people can casually come to. One of the accompanying disciples immediately echoed, "That's right, Senior Nyo's poem was personally written by Senior Een here. This kind of situation is extremely rare. Indeed, it was not a place where ordinary people could enter. The price should have been raised long ago, and not just anyone could barge in. Otherwise, it would be a disgrace to the statuses of the two seniors." Hu Yuntian smiled faintly. As soon as he turned around, his eyes lit up. His gaze fell directly on Yenyu, who was standing at the door. He lightly clapped his hands and said, "With such a stunning beauty in the Sleeping Spring Loft, 100,000 upper-grade spirit stones is indeed not a lot. It is worth the price." As he said this, he pointed at Yenyu and said to the people beside him, "Make the arrangements. She will accompany me today." As soon as these words came out, the surrounding people were in an uproar. Yenyu's expression changed slightly, but she still stood there with a smile. Hu Yuntian looked back in confusion. Someone beside him tugged at him with some fear and whispered, "Third young master, your words are a little too much. She is the owner of this place, and Senior Nyo is now living here." He did not finish his words, but Hu Yuntian immediately reacted. Now that the matter between Yenyu and Nyo Yud had spread everywhere, he had naturally heard about it. Although he was arrogant, he also knew that there were some people he could provoke, and some people he could not. Nyo Yud dared to slap Fatty Pei's face in public. He was a person that even Een Baikong had to be polite to. He was not someone that Hu Yuntian, the third young master, could afford to offend. He immediately strode in front of Yenyu, bowed and apologized, "So it is Owner Yen. It was I who spoke rudely. Please forgive me, Owner Yen." The surrounding crowd suddenly sighed. Yenyu had climbed up to a high branch, and now even Hu Changsho's son had to be courteous to her. Things were really different now. "It is not your fault for not knowing. Please come in." Yenyu smiled and waved her hand. After Hu Yuntian and the others bowed, they did not dare to be presumptuous anymore and walked in. Fortunately, these words were not heard by Yu Qianshou in the backyard. Otherwise, Hu Yuntian might be in some trouble today. Yenyu stood there for a while longer, and a few more waves of people came in. When they passed by her, they all respectfully saluted and said, "Headmaster Yen." They were all disciples of famous sections. Ordinary cultivators indeed couldn't afford such a high price. The crowd couldn't help but sigh. A group of disciples of famous sects actually bowed respectfully to a brothel proprietress. This was simply unheard of. Just as Yenyu felt that it was inappropriate for her to stand at the door and was about to turn and leave, a burst of exclamations came from the street. Most of the crowd in front of Sleeping Spring House immediately dispersed and rushed to the street. Yenyu was startled. She immediately called over a shop assistant and ordered him to see what was going on. Not long after, the shop assistant ran back to inform her that the World Commerce Association had announced new information about the sale of limit-breaking pills. In the backyard, Yu Qianshou, who was lying naked on the bed, was humming a tune when he suddenly heard the exclamations coming from the distant street. He immediately got up, put on his clothes, and prepared to see what was going on. Just as he walked into the courtyard, he saw Yenyu swaying her hips as she walked over. "What's going on outside?" Yu Qianshou asked. Yenyu relayed the information that the shop assistant had gathered in detail. The restriction-breaking pill costs 2 million high-grade spirit stones each. Those who wish to purchase it must pay a deposit of 1 million. Yu Qianshou said a few words, his eyes narrowed slightly, and then he let out a series of cold laughter. He now understood everything. He really had to give it to Een Baikong. This old fellow's business mind was really amazing. His wishful thinking was really good. No wonder he dared to say such arrogant words. If there were tens of thousands of limit-breaking pills that cost 1 million high-grade spirit stones, he would have eaten them all. At first, he thought that Een Baikong was just trying to brush him off when he said he would sell limit-breaking pills. He didn't think that Een Baikong would sell limit-breaking pills to other forces and watch them grow stronger. he didn't expect that Ian Baikong was still hiding such a trick. For example, if an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator wanted to raise their cultivation to early-stage tribulation passing, they would need 9 limit-breaking pills, which were worth 1 million. In addition to the 1.2 million or so spirit stones used, one cultivator would need to spend about 10 million high-grade spirit stones. Now that he was selling limit-breaking pills for 2 million each, it was equivalent to giving Ian Baikong one for free. The more people bought, the more limit-breaking pills he would get for free. In the end, he only needed to pay a small portion of the spirit stones for the world commerce's disciples to absorb spiritual energy to raise their cultivation. With the world commerce's financial resources, it wouldn't be a problem at all. The limit-breaking pills he consumed would be equivalent to getting them for free. What was even more amazing was that Ian Baikong actually used the tactic of paying a deposit in advance. In other words, no matter how many limit-breaking pills he bought from him in the future, he would still have to fork out the capital of the few billion he gave him before. If he played it even more ruthlessly and got the deposit of 5 billion, he could immediately buy another 5,000 pills from him. He wouldn't even have to fork out the capital, because once the previous 5,000 limit-breaking pills were delivered to the buyer, the original capital of the few billion would be recovered. Ian Baikong didn't have to bear any risk at all, because if he played it this way, the 5,000 limit-breaking pills he had on hand would put him in an invincible position. Amazing. He had succeeded in this gamble and was now sitting on the fishing platform. Previously, he really thought that Ian Baikong would need to mobilize a large amount of the world commerce's working capital to buy the pills. Now that he saw the situation, he decisively made a move and got back the capital with interest. In the future, he wouldn't need to mobilize a single cent of the world commerce's working capital. With his methods, no one from the various countries would be able to escape his grasp. Perhaps some people would say that 2 million per limit-breaking pill was too expensive and that no one would buy it. But the real limit-breaking pill was so miraculous that it couldn't be bought for 2 million per pill. Moreover, for the various countries, starting from accepting a disciple and nurturing him to the early stage of tribulation passing would take many years, including daily expenses. Even if they spent 40 to 50 million high-grade spirit stones, they still might not succeed. Now, they only needed to spend 10 million high-grade spirit stones. Even with the price of the 7 treasures pill, it wouldn't exceed 20 million. Moreover, it was a quick success, which was equivalent to creating a group of early-stage tribulation passing experts for their own use. Who could resist such a temptation? And the most fatal point was that they had no choice but to buy it. Who would be willing to watch others grow stronger and threaten them? Selling the 7 treasures pill at its original price would not earn a single spirit stone. From this, it could be seen that Ian Baikong had asked for the right to buy and sell the 7 treasures pill not to make money. In reality, it was to control the supply of the 7 treasures pill and choke the throats of those who bought the limit-breaking pill. No matter how many limit-breaking pills you bought, you couldn't surpass the influence of the world commerce. If the buyer felt that it was unfair, then they could choose not to buy the limit-breaking pill and someone else would buy it. The 7 treasures pill was controlled by Ian Baikong, so the initiative was in his hands. He could decide how he wanted to play. Others couldn't refuse to buy the limit-breaking pill. You think it's unfair? You don't want to buy it? Fine, I won't force you. I can sell some of the 7 treasures pill to your opponents, as long as you can sit tight. If everyone buys it, that's fine too. It's not that I won't sell the 7 treasures pill, but I'll sell it slowly. However, I don't know when I'll be able to sell it. Chapter 613. Furthermore, everyone would receive an equal share. Even if there were more, it wouldn't be enough for so many countries to divide it. Even if they took out 10,000 7 treasures pills at once, if they were divided among 300 countries, each country would at most get around 30 pills. When the time came, he would have an excuse to say that his refining speed was just that. For the sake of fairness, no one could do anything to him. If you were not satisfied, you could ask others to buy less and sell the rest to you. But who would agree to this? But the World Chamber of Commerce was different. As long as they earned enough money, they would immediately have enough limit-breaking pills and 7 treasures pills to use together. This way, Een Bai Kong would be taking everyone's money and earning everyone's money. If they provided enough limit-breaking pills, he could use the 7 treasures pills as leverage to extract as much spirit stones from the various nations as possible. When the time came, he might not even need to spend a single spirit stone to use the spirit stones from the various nations to raise the cultivation of every disciple of the World Chamber of Commerce to the early stage of passing tribulation. Imagine how terrifying it would be if all the disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce became passing tribulation experts. Just the thought of it sent shivers down one's spine. Even if someone killed Een Bai Kong, any small leader of the World Chamber of Commerce could easily lead a group of disciples to retaliate. That would be unbearable. No matter how high one's cultivation was, if they couldn't kill you, they could kill your subordinates and turn you into a lord without an army. At that time, what kind of lord would you be? If you didn't have any subordinates, would you have to go to the spirit stone mines to dig for spirit stones? Unless someone was willing to be like Bai Changchun, arrogant and solitary, and didn't need subordinates. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and sneered incessantly. Unfortunately, no matter how cunning you, Een Bai Kong, are, you won't be able to escape my palm. You want limit-breaking pills? Fine, I'll sell as many as you want. I'll let you earn them slowly. The more you earn, the harder it will be for you to clean up. Once the 7 treasures pills hit the market in large quantities, it will be the end of the World Chamber of Commerce. I won't have to worry about that jade archive depicting the various nations. I'll take this opportunity to take care of you. Seeing his expression, Yin Yu asked carefully, is there a problem? I still want to buy some limit-breaking pills. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He looked her up and down and said in surprise, you're already at the early stage of crossing calamity. Why do you still want to buy the restriction-breaking pill? Yen Yu shook her head and said, it's not me who bought it, it's the Sisters of Sleeping Spring Loft. Everyone earns this shameless money just to go further on the path of cultivation. A few of them occasionally encountered generous benefactors and saved some money, wanting to take advantage of this opportunity to improve their cultivation to the next level. However, they're afraid that they won't be able to buy them if they have too few pills and too many people, so they want me to buy some through my relationship with you. At first, I didn't agree, but I couldn't resist their begging. After all, it's not easy for everyone. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu seemed to be a little unhappy, Yin Yu hurriedly waved her hand and said, don't worry, the money they have saved up is only enough for each of them to buy one. Also, they would pay according to the selling price, not a single spirit stone less. They're just worried that they won't be able to see the 5,000 restriction-breaking pills on the market before they'll be divided up by the big powers. Then, she weakly added, is it okay? If not, then forget it. Yu Qianqiu frowned and stared at Yen Yu, not knowing what to say. Although he had a physical relationship with her, he didn't know her very well. There were some truths that he couldn't tell her. After thinking for a while, he frowned and said, Yen Yu, some things aren't as simple as they seem. Some things are games played by the upper echelons of the cultivation world. It's not something you can afford to play. As for your sisters, you can do whatever they want. Don't say anything, just tell them that I don't agree. However, it's best if you don't get involved. Remember, once you earn enough money, leave this place quickly. From his words, Yin Yu had already sensed that something big was about to happen. Now that she heard him talk about games played by the upper echelons, she realized how terrifying this matter was. She solemnly nodded and said, I understand. I won't get involved in this matter. Yu Qianqiu gave a gratified smile. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the sky. He thought to himself, after Een Bai Kong announced this news, he should have come looking for me, right? Doesn't he want to find some excuses to fool me? While Yen Yu was wondering what he was looking at, a shop assistant ran in from the back door of the front hall. After bowing to Yu Qianqiu, he respectfully said to her, Boss, there are a dozen female loose cultivators outside. They said they want to stay in the building. Rather than calling them shop assistants, it was more appropriate to call them pimps. Yen Yu waved her hand and said, Bring them here. The shop assistant nodded and went back. What do you mean by staying in the building? Yu Qianqiu asked in surprise. Isn't it all because of you? Yanyu rolled her eyes and explained in a bad mood. Only then did Yu Qianqiu realize that staying in the building was just a nice way to put it. To put it bluntly, staying in the building and selling their bodies to earn money. Ever since the Sleeping Spring brothel became famous and the price increased, there would be 1 or 2 female loose cultivators joining the Sleeping Spring brothel every day. However, it was the first time that more than a dozen of them came at the same time. It must have something to do with the minimum spending of 100,000. With such a high income, even if the Sleeping Spring brothel took a cut, it was still an irresistible temptation for them. Perhaps even those loose cultivators who didn't want to do this couldn't resist such a big temptation. Yu Qianqiu was really speechless. He came up with the idea of increasing the price, not only for Yan Yu's sake, but also for the sake of her. If they were greedy and willing to continue to sink, then they couldn't blame others. But who knew that it would actually attract more people to do this? But who knew that it would attract more people to this line of work? He didn't know if he was doing a good thing or a bad thing. At this time, the shop assistant had already brought in 13 women. Their appearances were not bad. In fact, in the cultivation world, most of the people who had spiritual roots were better looking than mortals. Or they would go to the other extreme, and their appearance would be abnormally ugly. After the 13 women bowed to the 2 of them, they stood in a row under the shop assistant's instructions. Yan Yu also took out the demeanor of a brothel keeper and checked them one by one. Sigh. What a sin. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He also looked at these women. A woman with disheveled hair and a dirty face attracted his and Yan Yu's attention at the same time. Both of them couldn't see through her cultivation. This made the 2 of them feel a little strange. For loose cultivators whose cultivation had reached the crossing calamity stage, even robbing in the cultivation world would be better than doing this. The woman's head was slightly lowered, and her hair was disheveled, so they couldn't see her face clearly. Her untidy clothes were wrapped around her body, as if they hadn't been washed for years. Yan Yu turned around to look at Yu Qianqiu. She saw that he was squinting at the woman. Obviously, he also noticed that something was wrong. With Yu Qianqiu's support, Yan Yu wasn't afraid that the other party would come up with any tricks. She then stood in front of the women and started lecturing. Since everyone has come to Sleeping Spring brothel, you must be clear about the rules. However, I still have to remind you. I don't have too many rules here. Anyone who comes to my brothel will be provided with a single room for free. I won't force you to do anything, and it's up to you whether or not you want to receive customers. However, Sleeping Spring brothel will take 50% of the revenue from receiving customers, which is half. The tax for cornucopia will be paid by Sleeping Spring brothel. At this point, among the 13 people, someone suddenly asked, "Didn't you say that Sleeping Spring brothel is now exempt from all taxes?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the woman who spoke, speechless. Yan Yu nodded and said, "Last time, Senior Yin said that Sleeping Spring brothel is exempt from all taxes. If you really don't want to collect taxes, then I will return the tax to you. It's all hard-earned money, so I won't take advantage of you. In other words, if you don't pay taxes, Sleeping Spring brothel will only take a 40% commission. The reason why I want to take a commission is because the workers in the brothel have to pay, and this Sleeping Spring brothel also has to pay rent and taxes every month, plus some necessary bribing. In fact, I won't earn much from each of you. However, I have to make one thing clear." Yan Yu stared at the woman with disheveled hair and a dirty face and said, "I know it's not easy for everyone. Although I also want to help everyone, Sleeping Spring brothel has to be maintained. If anyone doesn't want to do it, it's better to quit as soon as possible because Sleeping Spring brothel has a rule, and it's an old rule. You'll have to consider it every 5 days, and if you don't receive any customers, it means you're not suitable for this business. It's better to leave your room for those who really need it. When the time comes, you'll be asked to leave. Do you have any other questions?" Yu Qianqiu looked at Yan Yu, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. This woman was a virgin, but she had a way of managing a brothel. He really didn't know where she learned it from. The other women were a little embarrassed to speak, but the woman who asked the question earlier spoke again. How do you settle the money? You can settle it every day, because you can come and go freely here. No one will restrict you, and you can leave at any time. If you stay here for a long time and don't rush to settle the bill, we will take the initiative to settle it with you once a month, and you won't be short of money. After Yenyu finished explaining, she once again asked if everyone had any questions. At this point, no one asked anything else. Yenyu immediately told the waiter, arrange a room for each of them. The waiter obeyed and waved at the dozen women, come with me. Yu Qianqiu looked at the group of people walking away in a line, and was a little dumbfounded. Did they start doing it just like that? Yenyu looked at him and rolled her eyes. Have you never seen this before? Do you think I'm quite bad? You. What are you looking at? She looked back at the direction he was looking at, and saw that the woman with disheveled hair and a dirty face was still standing in the same place. The waiter also noticed that one person was missing, and shouted over, Hey, what are you spacing out for? Come with me. The woman with disheveled hair and a dirty face raised her head and smiled charmingly at Yenyu. Honey, I have something to talk to you in private. I don't know if it's okay. There was a charm hidden in her laughter that made people's bones go soft, and her eyes were also overflowing with charm, but her face was really dirty, and her appearance couldn't be seen clearly. As soon as Yu Qianqiu heard this voice, he was startled. He felt that it was very familiar, so he stared at her suspiciously and carefully looked at her. Yenyu's expression was also slightly stagnant, then she waved to the waiter and said, You take them to go first. Chapter 6:14. The sounds of extravagance could be heard continuously in Sleeping Spring Tower, but the backyard was quiet. 3 people stood there and sized each other up. You must be Senior Niu Yud, whose name has shaken the world, right? The unkempt woman asked respectfully. There was a hint of puzzlement in her alluring eyes. She seemed to have seen this Senior Niu somewhere before. Hence, she sized up Yu Qianqiu bit by bit. Yu Qianqiu nodded without saying a word, but his heart trembled. That gaze was too familiar. It was a gaze that could charm all living things, and it was exactly the same as the 100 Charms beauties. However, the unkempt and dirty attire made it impossible for others to see her true appearance. Yu Qianqiu suppressed the shock and bewilderment in his heart and sent a private message to Yenyu. Yenyu, let her return to her original appearance. Yenyu understood what he meant and said to the unkempt woman, I don't care who you are. If you have something to say, please show me your sincerity. I don't think there's anything to say to someone who hides her face. She casually pointed at the small room at the side of the house, which was used for bathing. Her meaning was already very clear, and there was no need for her to say anything else. The unkempt woman giggled and bowed slightly to the 2 of them. She did not waste her breath and walked into the room where the bathing area was. Yu Qianqiu stared at the figure that disappeared behind the door, and he was a little absent-minded. He noticed that not only did the woman's gaze resemble the 100 Charms beauties, even her laughter was the same. Although her disheveled hair and dirty face covered her true appearance, as long as she made a sound or revealed a frown or a smile, her overflowing charm could not be concealed. But why would the 100 Charms beauty appear here? Yu Qianqiu frowned. He was almost certain that it was her, but he did not dare to be certain before he saw her true appearance. After all, the 100 Charms beauty was the master of a cult, and there was no way she would come here so easily. Once her identity was exposed, it would be too dangerous. Yenyu looked at the room, then at Yu Qianqiu's expression. She felt that there was something off about his expression. The sound of water splashing in the enclosure stopped. After a while, the wooden door creaked open. The 2 people in the courtyard were stunned at the same time. Yenyu's eyes were filled with amazement, while Yu Qianqiu was speechless. A beautiful and graceful figure leisurely walked out. Her light muslin was like fog as she walked, and her charming smile was dazzling. She was truly a peerless beauty that could turn all living things upside down. Who else could it be other than the 100 Charms beauty? The enchantress of 100 Charms walked in front of the 2 of them and casually spun her arms in a circle. The spring scenery under the light muslin was lively and fragrant. Every frown and every movement was full of charm. Then, she bowed and said, "Master, how is my sincerity?" Yan Yu's stunned expression had yet to fade away. At this moment, when she stood next to this woman and compared herself to her, she suddenly felt a sense of inferiority. In the past, he was quite confident in his own style. Only now did he realize that there was always someone better than him out there. As a woman, this was the first time she knew that a woman could be so feminine that even a woman's heart palpitated with eagerness. When the two women stood together, in terms of appearance, they were equally matched. However, in terms of charm, the difference was not that small. It was like one was a disciple who had just seen the door of charm, enough to make a man's heart palpitate with eagerness, while the other was a graceful grandmaster who could charm all living things. They were not on the same level at all. It was really her. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He did not find it strange. The reason why the Enchantress of 100 Charms was called the Enchantress of 100 Charms was because of her peerless charm. Moreover, after spending some time together, he had more or less developed some immunity. At this moment, he really wanted to ask her loudly, "What are you doing here? You're really causing trouble. Are you tired of living?" Yan Yu glanced at Yu Qianqiu and was slightly startled. She was curious. Such a woman, even her own heart palpitated with eagerness. However, this Niu Yud's eyes were somewhat cold. "No wonder you want to conceal your true appearance. With your charm, once you reveal yourself, I'm afraid you won't be able to reach the cornucopia." Yan Yu could not help but praise. She then asked, "Don't you have something to say to me? Please speak." A wise person does not lie in front of others. The Enchantress of 100 Charms said to Yan Yu indifferently, "I want to find a place to stay here." Her eyes were always faintly discernible at Yu Qianqiu, still a little puzzled. Yan Yu was startled. She shook her head and said, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. I don't know what you want to do, and I don't want to know. However, my spring slumber loft is a group of people with a poor life. We are weak and can't afford to cause trouble. Please find another place to stay." "I'm sorry." The Enchantress of 100 Charms explained, "Mistress Yan has misunderstood. I'm definitely not here to cause trouble. I just heard about the bustle of the cornucopia and wanted to come and take a look. After the cornucopia ends, I'll leave." "Oh." Yan Yu said disapprovingly, "There are many cornucopia restaurants and inns. Although it's a little expensive, I'm sure this sister isn't someone who lacks money to spend. Mistress Yan has a good eye. I really don't want to be harassed too much, and I don't dare to cause trouble." The Enchantress of 100 Charms smiled bitterly as she looked at her figure. Yan Yu was silent. Indeed, with her beauty, if she were to show her face in public, it would indeed cause trouble. This was the sorrow of women. She paused and said, "Then why did you choose to stay in my spring slumber loft?" The Enchantress of 100 Charms turned around and bowed to Yu Qianqiu. She said, "It's naturally because of Senior Niu. Senior Niu's cultivation is profound, and his name shakes the world. With Senior Niu in the spring slumber loft, who dares to touch the people of the spring slumber loft?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. "You really know how to choose a place. In Huaxia, you hid in the myriad flower loft, and here, you want to hide in the spring slumber loft. But why do I keep bumping into you in this kind of place?" Just at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the courtyard. Sikongju suddenly appeared and nodded slightly to Yan Yu. The latter quickly returned the greeting, "Senior Sikong." Sikongju glanced coldly at the Enchantress of 100 Charms and paused slightly. He then bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Senior Niu, my master invites Senior to the God of Wealth Peak for a chat." They really came. Yu Qianqiu nodded and glanced at the Enchantress of 100 Charms. He transmitted his voice to Yan Yu, "This woman's background isn't ordinary. Keep her for now. She won't be a hindrance to you." He casually threw out a flying sword and stepped on it, flashing towards the peak of the God of Wealth Peak. Sikongju glanced at the Enchantress of 100 Charms again and flew into the sky. "This person is the spirit-severing expert, Sikongju?" The Enchantress of 100 Charms asked with a burning gaze. After getting Yan Yu's confirmation, she couldn't help but sigh. She sneaked all the way here and didn't expect to see two legendary spirit-severing experts today. Ever since China's cultivation world found out that there were spirit-severing experts in the various countries, all the sects were worried that they would be annihilated at any time. Fortunately, that scum of the cultivation world, Yu Qianqiu, who was forced to leave the Cultivation World Alliance, had already made a name for himself in the various countries. It was said that he had even established a relationship with a few spirit-severing experts. As a result, no matter how close the sects were with Yu Qianqiu, they all secretly sent people over in hopes of contacting Yu Qianqiu. When the Enchantress of 100 Charms heard that there was a #1 expert in the cultivation world, she was immediately shocked. This was because she remembered that Yu Qianqiu had once told her that his master was an invincible figure in the world. She didn't know before, but after understanding, the Enchantress of 100 Charms was moved. If there was anyone in the cultivation world who was invincible, it would probably be Bai Changchun. Thinking of all kinds of stories about Yu Qianqiu that she had heard, the Enchantress of 100 Charms was even more certain of her guess. It was said that Bai Changchun, who had an unfathomable cultivation level, had a close friend, a spirit-severing expert called Mr. Nongzhu. During the saber-drawing assembly, it seemed that the people of Limitless Island had some misgivings about the girl in purple beside Yu Qianqiu and said that her master was Mr. Nongzhu. Later, she heard that when Yu Qianqiu was in Dayang Kingdom, he was together with Mr. Nongzhu. The two coincided, so it was definitely not a coincidence. The Enchantress of 100 Charms was already 90% sure that Yu Qianqiu's master should be the #1 expert in the world, Bai Changchun. She didn't know this secret. Although she didn't mention it to others, she was wild with joy. The Enchantress of Illusion Palace was already declining in her hands. Now that they were facing such a serious situation, she absolutely wouldn't allow the Enchantress of Illusion Palace to be destroyed in her hands. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if the Chinese cultivation world was overturned, she had to find a way to protect the Enchantress of Illusion Palace. This was her responsibility as the palace master. However, the spirit-severing experts who stood at the peak of the cultivation world in all the countries were a group of powerful existences. With her ability, there was no hope of protecting it. Therefore, she thought of Yu Qianqiu. The disciple of the #1 expert in the world should have the ability to help her. However, how could the remaining elders of the Enchantress of Illusion Palace let the palace master take the risk so easily? Under the strong resistance of the elders, she still resolutely decided to come to find Yu Qianqiu for help. The reason she convinced the elders was that all the sects were sending people to contact Yu Qianqiu. However, she had a close relationship with Yu Qianqiu, so she had an advantage over others. For the stability of the Enchantress of Illusion Palace, before she left, she passed the position of Enchantress of Illusion Palace to an elder. She knew that her beauty would cause trouble. After sneaking in here, she had been dressing herself up unsightly and secretly looking for Yu Qianqiu everywhere. However, when she arrived here, Yu Qianqiu seemed to have disappeared from the world. Even if she went through all kinds of hardships, she couldn't find any trace of Yu Qianqiu. The holding of the treasure basin gave her a little hope. She was sure that Yu Qianqiu was a person who liked to join in on the fun. Maybe she could find him at the treasure basin. If she really couldn't find him, she was ready to take the risk of breaking into the demon domain. Finally, she arrived at the treasure basin, but she thought of a problem. Since Yu Qianqiu had the intention to hide his traces, even if he came to the treasure basin, he might not let everyone know. Then how could she find him? It just so happened that the House of Spring Slumber had caused a great commotion, and with the support of the mysterious expert Niu Yud, no one dared to find trouble with the House of Spring Slumber. She gritted her teeth and decided to show her true face at the House of Spring Slumber. Presumably, with her beauty, she should be able to quickly become famous in the treasure basin. As long as Yu Qianqiu came to the treasure basin, she didn't believe that he would be so heartless to not come out to see her. The temptress naturally knew how dangerous it was to do this. It was easy to show her face, but difficult to get away. But there was no doubt that this was the most promising way to find Yu Qianqiu. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.